of March 19 of Istanbul's opposition mayor Erkim İmamoğlu on corruption charges. His supporters say that our force has sparked the most significant anti-government protests in Turkey in over a decade, in a major test for President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. After over a week of nighttime street protests, the Republican People's Party on Saturday mobilized hundreds of thousands of people for a giant rally in Istanbul, calling for the release of İmamoğlu, seen as the candidate with the best chance of defeating Erdogan at the ballot box after almost a quarter of a century in power. Nearly 2,000 people have been arrested, including some journalists who had been covering the protests. A Swedish journalist was also detained on his arrival in Turkey to cover the protests. The Turkish presidency has said that he has been arrested on charges of membership in an armed terrorist organization and for insulting the president. The presidency said, known for anti-Turkey news and his closeness to the terrorist organization PKK, the banned Kurdish militant group. They also added that this arrest decision has no connection whatsoever to journalistic activities. Let's take a look at what the protesters have to say.
Çünkü biz hak, hukuk, adalet için buradayız. Şimdi ülkemizde maalesef gerçekten hukuksuz işler gerçekleşmekte. Yani hukuka güven kalmadı, öyle söyleyeyim. Hukuka güven kalmadı. Hukuka güven kalmadığı için biz de dolayısıyla en doğal hakkımız olan protesto hakkımızı
deyip buraya gelemeyen insanları gerçekten çok kınıyorum. Çünkü bir vatan ve millet için hep beraber toplum olarak kalmak zorundayız. Çünkü dünyamızı biz yönetiyoruz, halk yönetiyor. Herhangi başımızda olan insanlar değil, bizim bu dünyayı kurtarmamız gerektiğini düşündüğüm için bugün burada olarak...
I have with me Professor Malav Nalapa, the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, joining us on the broadcast to give us his perspective. Professor Nalapat, in your assessment, what really will be the next steps for Erdogan as far as the discontent on the ground is now concerned?
Devika, in my view, this is the tipping point, or very close to a tipping point. The fact is that the Turks and Turkey was known as a country that basically opposed Wahhabism in the Arabian Peninsula. And now, in an ironic turn of history, Erdogan is seeking to re-establish Wahhabism in Turkey, transplanted from Saudi Arabia at a time when Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is publicly saying and very strongly acting also to remove influence of Wahhabism, because he recognizes the destructiveness that this is causing, not only the Saudi image, but the future of an economy which has to depend after some time on non-fossil fuel exports. So I'd like to say, Devika, that this is an ironic transformation of the roles of a country. And now we have the İmamoğlu coming in defense of the traditional Turkish position, which is in defense of secularism, which is against Wahhabism, and confronting President Erdogan, who is completely embraced Wahhabism in total disregard of the principles set up by the founders of Turkey. Now, it was absolutely astonishing that this is happening. I mean, Ataturk will be spinning in his grave, at what is happening in his beloved Turkey. But the reality of the situation is that this is the way it is developing. And I'd like to point out that, in my view, the tipping point is either reached or very close to be reached. And as we saw in other parts of the world, ultimately when you have a tipping point, then public protest becomes too large to smother with any kind of repressive measures. And if you look at the crowds that are there in Turkey, and not only in Istanbul, not only in Ankara, but in smaller cities as well. Well, the reality is, I think Erdogan is on the way out, and he may fight for some time. He may use the most horrible methods, as he always does. But finally, the writing is on the wall, and Turkey will return to its original moderate roots, Devika.
Absolutely. Professor Nalapa, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast.